Loved by the masses, but scorned by people abroad. Rodrigo Duterte is the most unorthodox and most controversial president the Philippines has ever seen.
Papatayin talaga kita. Yan ang totoo. Let it be announced to the world.
Criminality, illegal substance, they were never a national concern before Duterte.
But as he bows out of office after a fixed 6-year term, his fate hangs in a balance.
May narinig na lang po, putok po na baril. Wala naman po ginawa yung tatay ko para pupatayin nila.
Will he face political retribution for his bloody war on drugs? And what is his legacy to society?
Ultimately, it's a question of what kind of democracy that we Filipinos want. What sort of sacrifices are we willing to make?
If you're a drug pusher, if you're a drug lord here, do not come for me for tears. I will not give you any.
For nearly 30 years, Rodrigo Duterte was the iron-fisted but well-loved mayor of Davao City, credited with routing crime from its streets. He published names of alleged criminals, then days after, they would be found dead, slain by unidentified gunmen.
Davao was the hotbed of insurgency. And Duterte was credited for taming this environment, first by going after the communists, and then through organized vigilantes and extrajudicial killings.
His success reached the gates of Malacanang Palace in early 2002. Back then, former President Gloria Arroyo wooed the mayor to lead the police force in abolishing the illegal drug trade and kidnapping that had flourished across the Philippines. Duterte turned down the offer, preferring to focus on governing his city instead. Yet a decade and a half later, another former president was rooting for him for higher office. Former President Fidel Ramos encouraged Mayor Duterte to run for the presidency.
Because it is high time.
Development through a iron fist approach, and perhaps the Davao model provided that template for a strong leader that will pave the way for eventual economic development.
Though he was an important figure to those in power, Mayor Duterte remained largely unknown to the rest of the public. But a colorful campaign in 2015 changed all that.
Nobody has the right to lecture on me. God, do not do it. Gusto mo, the right word, magkababuyan tayo doon. Ginawa mo sa akin niya. I do not accept that proposition that anybody is superior than me. We're supposed to be equal there.
He dresses like the masses, he talks like the masses, he curses like the masses. So that kind of imaging, I think, really propelled him to that sort of iconic celebrity status.
The tough-talking mayor of Davao City also threatened to plant the Philippine flag on Scarborough Shoal, a rock outcrop in the South China Sea. It's an attempt to assert the country's sovereignty over the hotly contested waters.
There is a tendency for Filipinos not just to find that appealing, but also to depend on a strong man for our own grievances, for our own benefit.
Si Pangulong Duterte matapang. Parang lahat yan magsasabi lagi ng bambubulaklak na salita. Puro pangako maibibigay. Yung uniqueness niya po is yung prangka, nagmumura. Siguro kailangan, kaya naisip ko po na siguro kailangan na natin ng leader na ganito.
We will not stop until the last drug lord, the last financier, and the last pusher have surrendered or put behind bars or below the ground if they so wish.
Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
He also made a bold claim that he could get rid of drugs, crimes, and corruption in his first few months in office. "48-year-old factory worker Marilyn Malimban is among many Filipinos who have witnessed just how prevalent and pervasive illegal drug activity was in the country. Illegal drugs are rampant, especially in impoverished villages where she lives. Her common-law partner, Jess, was also an occasional user of methamphetamine.
Lantaran naman talaga yung pagbintahan ng bali, parang simpleng bagay na lang po yun eh. Tinanong ko po sila, bakit kayo gumagamit? Ang sagot po nila, pampalakas ng loob, pampalaban sa puyat.
And upon assuming power as president, Mr. Duterte did something that was inconceivable by many people. The war on drugs turned out to be more ruthless than people had imagined. Police knocked on doors to ferret out alleged drug users and pushers without regard for human rights. It encouraged warrantless arrests and presumed its targets to be guilty of crime.
The most concerning thing about the war on drugs is the lack of due process in the way that it is being conducted. There is no determination, again, whether they are indeed involved in drugs, because, you know, it's so easy to accuse people. It's so easy to make a narrative, but to be fair about it, then you have to prove that before the courts of law.
Marilyn's hopes for a more humane approach to the drug fight turned into regret and despair. Jess, her common-law partner, fell victim to the war on drugs, an incident that became the first ever legal challenge to the president's war on drugs. On the afternoon of August 16, 2016, Jess and 4 of his friends were playing pool inside a shanty, passing time before their shift as nighttime garbage collectors. 4 armed men in civilian clothing barged into their room. They handcuffed Jess and his friends, dragged them into the yard, tied their hands to a tree, tortured them with electrical wire before gunning them down, one by one. A 12-year-old boy witnessed how Jess and his friends were unjustly executed.
Paglabas po ng ng kubo ng pulis, yung 3 nag-iiyakan na, nakaluhod, nagmamakawa na dun sa kanila. Pero ang hulas ng siguro iwan ko kung ano ba yung isip, naka-drugs ba yun, kasi umiiyak na yung 3 dun sa labas eh. Tinutok yung baril sa dito sa likod, tagos sa puso. Sino ba ang adik? Yung bang nakaluhod sa inyo, nagmamakaawa, wala namang ginawang masama sa inyo eh. Kayo? Anong karapatan yung pumatay ng tao? Wala namang...
Luckily, one of the victims managed to escape to safety, prompting an investigation into the case. The victim's gunmen turned out to be police officers who clearly went against the police force's rules of engagement.
When you talk about the rules of engagement of police officers, killing is not number 1 on their list. The prime duty of law enforcers is to bring people before the courts of law to make them accountable for the crimes that they have committed.
Back then, there were nearly 3,000 deaths like Jess. They share a single narrative. Authorities say the victims held guns and opened fire. That's why policemen had to shoot them down to death as an act of self-defense.
Every lawyer knows that if the action that you use to repel the attack is not commensurate to the attack against you, then there is such a thing as an incomplete self-defense. It means that you used force that is unnecessary. Did that person really fight back? Because again, just because the person is involved in a crime, it doesn't mean that the person deserves to die.
At saka, bakit po sila manlalaban? Saan kukuha ng drugs? Saka yung sinasabi ng mga pulis na may baril. Saka dun sa ano ni Jess, sa kamay, sa ano niya, nakaganon. Kaliwete si Jess sa kanan nila nilagay yung baril eh. Saka yung bulsa ni Jess, walang bulsa yun eh.
To date, official records say deaths due to self-defense add up to about 6,000.
Marami po akong naging kilala ng mga biktima mo ng war on drugs na oplantukhang na pinapatay sa harapan ng anak. Pinapatay sa harapan ng asawa. Pinapasok habang natutulog. Pinapasok sa loob ng bahay. Binabaril. Anong klaseng ano yan? Pamamalakad sa sinasabi ng war on drugs.
Early on in the campaign, vigilantes were responsible for roughly half of the deaths, according to ACLED, an NGO that collects information about political violence. 12-year-old Mark is a witness to one such case. The victims, his father and grandfather. 5 years ago, 2 masked men barged inside their home.
Nakabunit po sila. Kasi pumasok po sila po dun sa kwarto po ng lolo ko. Tapos may narinig na lang po, putok po na baril. Sobrang takot at takot po. Parang nanigas na lang po.
Civil society puts the death toll of nearly 30,000, or about 5 times more than the official tally. Vigilante killings typically lead to a dead end, as with the case of Mark. Authorities have halted investigations into their case, citing a lack of evidence. 6 years on, Mark is still in mourning.
Nalulungkot po ako. Nawala na po yung tatay ko. Dahil po na naman po ginawa yung tatay ko para po patayin nila. Wala po dapat na akong pinapatay at ang buhay po importante.
Critics say the war on drugs has worsened the climate of impunity that has been bearing down on the Philippines. So who should be made to account for this systemic crime?
We will not stop until the last drug lord, the last financier, and the last pusher have surrendered or put behind bars or below the ground if they so wish.
President Rodrigo Duterte vowed to get rid of illegal drugs in the Philippines, but it resulted in a bloodbath. With between 6,000 and 30,000 deaths in the hands of anti-drug vigilantes as well as the police force. President Duterte did not take criticisms lightly, especially on his war on drugs. Shortly after the war on drugs was carried out, Senator Leila de Lima filed a Senate resolution initiating a probe into the killings. Before any investigation could take off, the government released an intelligence report that put Senator de Lima in detention. The report is a drug matrix that tagged several government officials and alleged relationships with drug lords. It also alleges that Senator de Lima helped smuggle drugs inside the National Penitentiary. Senator De Lima has been in jail since then, and any attempt by opposition senators to open investigations on the war of drugs did not prosper in the upper house.
Because of what he did to Leila De Lima, etc., it's scary to challenge Duterte. No? And you can imagine if you are a politician also, it would take a lot of courage, it would take a lot of calculation if the risks and the benefits, right? If you weigh it, will it be more beneficial than risky?
The president has a tremendous latitude of power and influence. So, of course, no one would dare go against the president.
Like Senator De Lima, Chief Justice Maria Lord Sereno is an outspoken critic of the war on drugs. She insisted on the independence of the judiciary in carrying out justice for victims of the war on drugs. President Duterte responded with a clear warning against her.
I will order everybody in the executive department not to honor you. Please. Huwag mo akong order. Hindi ako gago.
President Duterte ordered the House of Representatives to expedite her impeachment based on her misdeclaration of personal wealth. A dismissal that critics say signaled the death of democracy. Without its staunchest critics, the war on drugs continued without legislative and judicial scrutiny.
By just being president, that person can already consolidate all of his authority over the different branches of government. So both institutionally and culturally, the office of the president is already powerful and therefore facilitates or provides a path towards authoritarian behavior.
As the body count swells, the tough-talking president paid no attention to solving the pattern of abuse in his war on drugs. Except for one cold-blooded murder that sparked nationwide outrage. Policemen were caught on surveillance camera dragging 17-year-old Kian de los Santos into a dark alley before shooting him to death. It refuted the police claims of self-defense. In a rare occurrence, President Duterte clarified that he does not tolerate any police wrongdoing in the war on drugs.
And trial ensued, and we were able to get judgment in a year's time. Now, you see where if there is political will to go into the investigation and prosecution, you achieve results.
The court sentenced Kian's murderers to up to 40 years in prison. Yet justice still falls short for Kian's family. They only won 1 out of the 3 cases filed in court, and Kian's uncle, Randy de los Santos, is still coping with the stigma. He was implicated in the case as a drug dealer.
Pero nung ako'y naalis sa trabaho, sinikap kong mamasukan, maghanap ng trabaho sa iba. Pero andun na eh. Yung mukha kong ito na nakita sa TV at kilala, na-identified. Nahirapan ako humanap ng trabaho. Diba?
He has also been helping his son cope with trauma.
Natatandaan ko na yung aking anak na maliit ay minsan na nakakita ng men in uniform na umiikot doon sa aking lugar. Sinabi niya, Papa, yun yung pumatay kay Kian. Sa isipan ng batang musmus na ito na aking anak, kumbinsido siya na yung men in uniform ang pumatay kay Kian. So sabi ko, hindi sila yan, anak. Kasama lang nila sa trabaho at kinakailangan ko pang mag-explain. So, yung mali na pagtingin sa mga uniformadong pulis ay nadala ng bata. At nagkaroon siya ng pangit na impresyon sa men in uniform.
Randy has joined a non-government organization helping some 250 orphaned wives and children cope with trauma, as well as the financial losses from the death of their breadwinner. To the marginalized like them, justice is slow.
Bakit wala pang sumusunod sa kaso ni Kian na tinutukan at inimbestigahan? Si Kian lang ba yung may ka-question na pagkapatay? Kay Kian lang, kung nagawa nila sa loob ng 1 taon, natapusin, bakit yung iba ay tumagal?
Since 1998, the Philippines is accountable to the International Criminal Court at The Hague, or the ICC, which deals with the most serious crimes of international concern. It looks into cases of genocide, war crimes, crimes of aggression, and crimes against humanity.
So in this particular case of the drug-related killings, this falls under crimes against humanity. When we say crimes against humanity, it is a systematic attack against a civilian population which is defenseless.
Like before, the president placed a hurdle against any opposition to his war on drugs. In March 2018, President Duterte withdrew the Philippines' membership in the International Criminal Court on the basis of prejudice. The withdrawal turned out to be a minor setback, as the ICC insisted that it still has jurisdiction over the Philippines. And cases like Kian's were examined for probable cause on crimes against humanity. After 3 years, the ICC finally announced it will open formal investigations into the war on drugs.
Why is it that it seems that there is a systematic way of killings that are happening? Where is that invisible hand coming from? Who is the conductor of all of this? So that's what we're looking for.
But President Duterte had always denied authorizing killings in the war on drugs, despite his controversial statement.
Make no mistake about it. I repeat again for all everybody's consumption. Do not kill if you are not in danger of losing your life. But if the resistance is violent, thereby placing your life in jeopardy, shoot and shoot him dead. Can I be more clearer than that?
So when he says, I am allowing you to kill within the bounds of the law, okay? So when you say within the bounds of the law, it's not clear. But the killing part is clear, right? Because he wants, again, the police, the law enforcers, in a way, he's saying, you defend yourselves, okay? But the message is to kill.
If found guilty, the president will face jail time at The Hague. But the process will take time.
His very own reaction when it comes to the ICC investigating him and his role in the war on drugs. I don't think he's scared, but definitely he's concerned.
A newly elected head of government will decide on his fate as soon as he leaves office in June. The president's daughter, Sara Duterte, had always been favored by the public as a successor to her father. Unexpectedly, she decided to run as vice president, an office that does not have actual power.
The original plan was really for either Senator Go to run for president and Mayor Sara to run for VP, or the other way around. I think that was their original plan. And when Mayor Sara decided not to run for president, that shook them up.
The 4 main candidates for the presidency have said they will allow the International Criminal Court to conduct investigations on the war on drugs. The frontrunner, Bongbong Marcos, a former political ally whom the president accused of snorting cocaine, however, has yet to declare his position on pursuing justice through the ICC. Be that as it may, Bongbong Marcos is running alongside Sara Duterte as his vice president. And in Philippine politics, alliances between families are transactional.
They are related by blood, so it would be more prudent to conclude or to assume that the Duterte-Marcos alliance includes President Duterte as well.
The popular president may emerge unscathed in the end, but for how long? Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte won by only a 39% plurality vote in a five-cornered presidential race. That means almost 60% of Filipinos did not elect him into office. Ironically, his war on drugs legitimized his power. Soon after carrying out his crackdown on alleged drug users, he scored an unprecedented 91% approval and trust rating. From then on, his popularity has continued to soar.
Ayun po, medyo nagkaroon po ng isa dibdib ko na maglakad-lakad mag-isa tuwing gabi dyan, is na po talaga ako.
The success of the war on drugs and the popularity of Duterte, they're all derived from exactly the same situation. The failure of the judiciary to uphold and protect the interests of ordinary Filipinos who do not have power.
On top of his astounding popularity, President Duterte tightened his grip on power through a resounding victory in the May 2019 midterm elections. His allies swept 9 out of the 12 Senate seats that were contested and retained a majority of 245 out of 297 seats in the House of Representatives.
So a lot of the politicians jumped ship to his political party because they were attracted, so to speak, to his strongman persona.
We have a supermajority. So when you are a supermajority in the House of Representatives, you're a supermajority in the Senate, you're also a supermajority in the Supreme Court, then you basically have, you know, all the institutions of government, you know, behind you. So you can do whatever you want to do.
Yet the president's invincibility failed to deliver the deep reforms he promised.
Duterte's legacy is a string of unfulfilled promises, perhaps even fake promises to begin with.
The shift to federalism is a case in point. President Duterte pledged to decentralize the government, which many Filipinos believe is a root cause of poverty.
Kasi, bakit laging Metro Manila? Parang merong inequality sa growth natin as a nation na ginauna mga cities, particularly Metro Manila, pero naiiwan yung mga probinsya.
What is also crystal clear is that President Duterte fell short of his promise to dismantle the oligarchs holding the government, despite claims that he has crushed the Philippines' elite. A few favored businessmen enjoyed more economic advantages than others under Duterte's watch.
Because of his strongman persona and the way he delivers, you know, his warnings, his tirades against political elites and oligarchs, it's easy for some of our fellow Filipinos to be convinced that he really has shaken the core of our elite class. But look at the evidence, look at what's happening. That's not the case. In fact, one can make an argument that we now have more oligarchs
The midterm elections added at least 100 more political clans with at least 2 family members holding public office.
What we have failed to liberalize is political system. It remains controlled by political elites that perpetuates their own economic elite at the local level and creates national elite during their time in office as president.
Apart from failing to initiate necessary reforms at the legislature, Duterte also turned his back on his promise to fight against China's incursion into the West Philippine Sea with all his might. In 2016, an international tribunal ruled that a part of the South China Sea claimed by China belonged to the Philippines. During the campaign, President Duterte promised to ride a jet ski and erect the Philippine flag on the contested Spratly Islands. But Duterte downplayed the ruling in exchange for billions of pledged Chinese investments and loans. Currently, the president does not have much to show for shifting his stance in favor of China. Only 3 of the planned 14 financed Chinese infrastructure projects have broken ground, while their aggression on the South China Sea continues. It triggered a public backlash. He responded to the criticisms harshly, saying it was nothing more than campaign rhetoric to win votes.
Panahon sa kampanya yan. At saka yung biro na yon, yung we call it bravado, yung bravado ko, was just a pure campaign joke. At kung naniniwala kayo sa kabila, pati na siguro si Carpio, pati si, I would say that you are really stupid.
Another stain on Duterte's legacy is his fight against corruption. During his campaign, the president dared the public to kill him should he fail to end corruption in his first 6 months in office. And as soon as Duterte sat in office, he fired a slew of government officials over alleged bribery, corruption, and misconduct.
If you really study it, nobody got prosecuted. No investigation was really done. So in other words, it was, to me, corruption is supposed to be a case. You're supposed to have a case, and it's supposed to be proven that the person was corrupt, and therefore the person is held accountable, right? That's the law. So it's also part of due process. But his style was really just shaming people.
The issue is President Duterte made a promise of eliminating corruption within 3 to 6 months, right? So again, that's the strongman style of governance showing itself, right? Which was never going to happen.
As of a recent count, out of 20 sacked officers, only 2 are in detention, while 4 are back serving the government. The president himself was the subject of public criticism for circumventing a law against corruption. Several corruption scams also hound the Duterte presidency, and one of these, dubbed the family scam, seemingly upended the president's succession plan. It involves $200 million in anomalous contracts with Family Pharmaceuticals, a company that may have ties with former President Duterte's economic advisor, a Chinese national, Michael Yang. Senate investigations question how the company bagged 10 contracts despite a lack of funds and a track record to handle big-ticket procurement.
The senators keep looking for the technical and financial requirements of Parmali. Wala ka nang pakialam dyan.
As early as third quarter of 2020, we were flagging it like COVID corruption. And then you see individuals who are not even legitimate, I will not even use the word respected business people that can supply, we're getting contracts from government. So you know for a fact that there is something wrong. And the president defended them. The president has just kept quiet towards the end of December.
The president's daughter, Sara Duterte, had always topped opinion polls as the public's preferred presidential candidate. But she caught everyone by surprise when she filed for candidacy as a vice president.
The daughter, who should have run for president to continue, but I believe did not run for one simple reason, Farmally. When it was filing of candidacy, Farmally was at the top of the news. I think that was the reason why then Mayor Sara Duterte decided to step backward.
From a lack of due process in his war on drugs, to a lack of accountability in his fight against corruption, and a failure in closing the gap between the rich and the poor, the Philippines had only become somewhat safer under Duterte's watch. Nearly half of the villages across the country have been declared drug-free. Many village leaders, like 54-year-old Antonio Cabantac, are hoping the war on drugs would carry on after the president's term.
Kasi ibang parents, minsan di nila alam na yung mga anak nila ay involved na pala sa illegal na droga. So nalalaman lang nila kapag nasa listahan na o nahuli anak nila. So mas marami pong ganun. Kaya kapag na-involve yung parents sa pag-advise sa kanilang mga anak para umiiwas sa illegal na droga, malaking bagay po na mas marami po yung makapagbagong buhay kaysa rin sa gagamit.
But will Mr. Duterte's flirting with an authoritarian strongman style of leadership live on long after he leaves office? Is that what the Filipino people really want? Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte will finally step down from office in June this year, leaving behind a mixed legacy. He has won both admirers and haters alike with his brand of populism and unorthodox style of leadership. 28-year-old real estate agent Sai, for one, says that if it were up to him, he would extend the president's stay in the highest seat of power. The staunch Duterte supporter feels that the president has done many things which others before had failed to achieve.
Nalulungkot na matatapos na yung si Pangulong Duterte, pero kung magkakaroon ng pagkakataon na magkaroon ng bigla siya magtsatsa, mag-constitution change ko po kagad siya, pabor po ako dun.
Sai is from a struggling lower middle-class family, and he has always felt left out by society and the government. Sai was an idealistic 16-year-old when Duterte's predecessor, President Noynoy Aquino, ran for office. Mr. Aquino won a landslide victory in 2009 on a message of hope, and Sai was among those who rooted for him. But hope turned into disappointment and despair.
Sabi ko ay may bagong pag-asa. Ayan na, sige, ito na yung yung hinihintay na presidente ng Pilipinas. Babalik na ang Aquino sa termino. Ayun po. Kaso po, parang failure po talaga yung nakita ko. Although tumaas po yung economy, opo, yung mga mayayaman, yumayaman, yung mga mahihirap, mahirap pa rin.
More than 30 years since the EDSA revolution that restored formal liberal democracy in the country, there was a general feeling that the promise of EDSA to deliver us to the promised land of development did not happen. So by the time Benigno Aquino became president, there was hope that the narrative of the EDSA revolution would be restored. Unfortunately, this did not happen.
Sai firmly believes that a tough and decisive leader is what the Philippines need, no matter if lives are to be sacrificed in the name of progress.
Lalo na po sa isang leader po kasi naniniwala po kasi ako na na hindi po kailangan na laging malambot yung puso mo sa grupo mo. Kasi parang makukonsenti po yung isang yung grupo mo na kapag ikaw nag-iintindi ka na nag-iintindi, puro pagmamahal lang, pang-i-spoil lang na ibibigay mo. So kailangan po talaga ng tapang pagdating po sa leadership. Siguro po isa rin po yun sa talaga nakatulong sa takot ng Pilipino na gumawa ng mali. Ayun po. Although nakakakonsensya po, tao po kasi yan may mga mamamatay po talaga.
But there are those who believe that President Duterte has hastened the march towards an illiberal democracy under his strongman rule, a system of governance that gives scant interest to human rights and the rule of law.
We don't even realize that, he really messed up our notions of democracy, right? Like, he made us believe that, we're still democratic even if there are extrajudicial killings. We're still democratic even if there's no due process, right? And so I think the casualty here is really our level of understanding of what, of what a good society looks like. Right? So we are really forced into believing that this is the best society, no? Even if you also have things that, just your neighbors died because of tokhang or because of military operations.
Even though our current president has that persona of a strongman and really has, even in his words, he tends to project himself as a strongman. Luckily for us, he only has shown tendencies of authoritarianism. But of course, that's already a red flag, right? That's already a warning sign for us.
Today, Filipinos are hugely divided between pro-Duterte loyalists who strongly favor his iron fist approach and those who advocate respect for the rule of law and the protection of human rights. 30-year-old writer and Duterte voter Tim Navarro, for one, feels that Mr. Duterte will leave behind an uneven legacy that does not favor the poor and the powerless.
Hindi niya na-solve yung inequality, hindi niya na-solve yung injustice, yung social injustice, na usually yung mga nahuhuli lang at mga napapatay is yung mga mahihirap lang. So while parang hindi siya sulit na bargain. So parang we felt peace and order, pero at the same time we felt fear and we felt we were powerless.
Yes, we want political will. We want somebody who's decisive, right? But now that we have this decisive figure at the helm of the government, we're realizing that, oh my goodness, he himself has become too excessive, right? He himself has reached beyond his constitutional powers, and yet he gets away with it because precisely that is what Filipinos want. This is the danger of illiberal democracy, beholdens us to strongman leaders. It doesn't change anything. It might give us the impression that things are changing because of political will, but at the end of the day, our hands are still tied and we are still beholden to strongman leaders.
Despite running roughshod over human rights allegations, his political opponents and the country's democratic institutions, President Duterte's popularity remains undiminished even as he approaches the end of his term. But will the allure of his brand of strongman politics continue after he leaves office? Opinion polls seem to indicate that many Filipinos are still in favor of continuity. And that is seen through the alliance between the president's daughter, Sara Duterte, and Bongbong Marcos, son of dictator President Ferdinand Marcos. The pair is now leading in the polls in the final weeks of campaigning.
Napagkatiwalaang nasubukan na yung Duterte. Kaya kinukonsider ko lang din po si BBM po, ayun po. Dahil nga po kay Sara Duterte lang din po. Ayun lang po.
Ultimately, it's a question of what kind of democracy that we Filipinos want. Maybe we don't need human rights. Maybe we don't need people empowerment. Maybe we don't need press freedom. Maybe what we need is discipline, because discipline and unity, by the way, are what's going to make progress possible for us. What sort of sacrifices are we willing to make? And illiberal democracy seems to answer the question for many, many Filipinos.
Observers say that the Filipinos will never allow themselves to be ruled by a dictator. But President Rodrigo Duterte, who was voted through a democratic process and ruled like an authoritarian leader, has ushered in a new era for Philippine democracy. One where the people in power should be higher than the power of the people.